Hi, Dylan Morrison here. Thanks for joining me again for a little chat. Today I'd like to tackle the whole idea of people who get under our skin. Now, do you have one of those in your life? I know I certainly have had in the past, and occasionally one pops up when I least expect it. What is the psychological dynamic going on when we have someone like this enter our life, causing a lot of psychological angst and inner tension and suffering? What I'd like to do is to look at the two kinds of folk who fit into that category today, and by letting you see how this whole dynamic operates, hopefully you begin to see things in a much more clear light and able to find a way out of this situation. First of all, we have what we call a monstrous double. Now, a double, as it suggests, is a clone of myself. Let me explain how this person appears in my life. I'm merrily going along, happily in my life, when I suddenly see someone who's fairly close to me beginning to desire an object of great worth. The example I usually use is a fellow who takes a fancy for a girl and starts to woo her and date her and just become totally focused on her. Now, one of his associates or one of his friends who's been hanging around him for quite a while begins to observe this, and although he had no intention of ever dating the girl previously, the very fact that his friend is dating her sets off a kind of chain reaction within him, so that he too wants to get in the act. In other words, the beautiful girl now becomes the object of his desire as well as that of his friend. So now we have two boys, two young men fighting for the same girl. Now what happens is, as we come into mimesis or imitation of the other and their desire for the young lady in question, we become more and more like them. We use the same tactics, the same techniques that he or she is using to obtain the other's devotion and love. In other words, we become a mirror image of the other. Now, when we waken up to the fact that someone else is becoming a mirror image of ourselves, it sets off total panic within, and we set up a rivalry defense that starts to ward off and fend the other. And of course, as each image of the other notices this in each other, they become more and more like each other. In fact, the poor girl is almost forgotten and sometimes even left alone in the midst of the new focus of the desire. In other words, to overcome my mirror image, or to overcome my monstrous double. The whole thing becomes a fight between two people. Now, the object, of course, in life doesn't have to be a pretty young lady. It can be anything. It can be a belief. It can be an experience of God. It could be money. It could be a home. It could be anything material, anything psychological. It could be a character trait. It could be popularity. Anything in human existence can become the object that initiates this fight. So, how do we get out of this? Well, let me say first that this bond is a very powerful bond. We want to fight to the death, because no longer is the object of our desire the important thing, but the other person or monstrous double seems to be a kind of block and a great threat to our own existence, our own personality, who we are, at least who we believe ourselves to be. So we're fighting no longer for something outside of ourselves, but we're fighting for a sense of identity that lies deep within. And of course, ego our false self is the one who gets involved in this great scrap. Now this can be a very, very painful and exhausting process. In some cases, it's one that goes on for years. The person in question may be a relative or a previously close friend. But the intensity of the fight between each other is totally amazing and pretty scary. So, do you have somebody like that in your life at present? And if so, how is the situation solved? Well, of course, ego says the only way is to win the battle, to win the struggle, in some way to get rid of the other person, to chase the other one off, and let me be me. The trouble is that this only intensifies the fighting powers of the other. By our very resisting them, they become stronger and more of a threat to us, so we fight back even more. So that tactic certainly doesn't work, so it's best to ignore ego's advice in that one. Is there anything else we can do? Well, yes, there is. I believe we can. The first is to recognize what is actually going on, the dynamic that's taking place between us. Another thing we need to do is to let go of blame. We're saying, if it wasn't for my monstrous double, everything would be fine. Remember, the other person is a double or a reflection of yourself. So in condemning them, you're actually condemning yourself. So that doesn't work either. So what do we do? Well, the best thing is to actually totally to disengage and move away. But that would be admitting defeat in the fight. That's exactly right. Because remember, outside ego, there is no defeat. Defeat is only the language of ego. In our spirit self, there is no victory and there is no defeat. There just is being. I am that I am. Now it's at this point that this spirit part of us can come and give us wisdom. How we can avoid so much psychological and internal angst that's been damaging our whole lives, causing us great pain. So literally we disengage totally from the relationship. We gracefully thank divine love for what we've learned. We bless the other and we walk away, back into freedom and back into our own psychic space. Now in the ancient culture, the existence of twins in a tribe reminded the tribe itself of the potential for future violence that comes through doubles. And in many tribes, twins were a taboo. In fact, one of the twins was usually killed, or else the twins themselves were ostracized from the society. These ancient peoples knew the potential for violence that is represented in two people being like one another. The best way I can think of this is Darth Vader fighting ObiWan Kenobi in one of the Star Wars movies. At a certain point in their battle, Obi-Wan turns off his lightsaber, lets it fall to the ground, and lets Darth supposedly destroy him. This is Obi walking away. Because Obi had a greater picture than Darth. He knew there was existence beyond physical death. Who was the true victor in this fight? Who was the true victor in this relationship? Well, I don't know about Victor, but Obi was certainly the freer of the two. For Darth was eaten up and consumed by his hatred of his old master Obi. So let me suggest that the best thing to do is to disengage and walk away, no matter what ego says and no matter how painful it is. Now the other kind of relationship that causes us great angst, that seems to really get under our skin, is one in which we've previously admired and loved, almost worshipped another person, only for the relationship to turn sour. I call this my model obstacle. This person was once my model. I became like them. I desired what they had. I attained to their state of being, their metaphysical sense of I. I wanted it. I wanted their certainty. I wanted their desire. But as I became more like them, I turned into a model obstacle for them. For they looked at me becoming like them and began to resist me and push me away. So rather than me being a follower or a disciple, I now became a threat to them. Now this kind of battle intensifies, and our model obstacle warfare turns into a monstrous double warfare. Again, the same solution is called for. Total disengagement and walking away. As we put geographical and psychological space between my model obstacle and myself, I will find that their power over me, or the amount of them that is sitting, lurking under my skin, begins to dissipate and disappear. It is only then that I will come back into true relational freedom. The freedom to be me and the freedom to love others. Now I hope today's few thoughts help you in your relationships, the ones you find yourself tangled up in at the moment. Thank you for listening.